Oh, this has been a hard one to write, that's for sure. Hey guys, Ali here. How are you doing? I just finished playing a game called State of Mind. A story which kind of puts your emotions and some of your core principles and values on a roller coaster at the same time, and then says to you, hang on for dear life. But it's under a smile that's very similar to the one that the wolf gave to Little Red Riding Hood right before going to snap that little innocent girl's face clean off. I have a few thoughts and feelings on the experience that I'd like to share with you right now. Cue the intro. State of Mind is set, well, in two places. One of them in the real world, a near-future dystopian version of Berlin, Germany, and a virtual reality simulation world called City 5. The real world at this time is living something of an Orwellian-like reality, where the globe is essentially split up into two nations, East and West, where corporate business interests control security, resources, technology, media narrative, and public relations, and are also the final word in any technological development and its validity based on the current agenda at play. There is next to no sense of state or government in place whatsoever, thus giving rise to a rather explicit depiction of unchecked capitalism. There is a campaign going on in the United States of the West asking for volunteers who are willing to go through a medical scan to forward the frontiers of medical research, as well as exploration, as the Mars program is looking to expand its horizons and looking for adventurous individuals to live on Red 1, a Martian settlement for the future. The story kicks off with rioting, explosions, and a car accident, the last of which brings into the picture one of the key characters of the story, a journalist named Richard. Father, husband, stubborn and determined, Richard relays one of the key perspectives on many of the conversations at play within the story itself. His story unfolds with him being taken from the chaos within the city to a hospital for treatment. By the time you get home, his bias, fears, and insecurities start to come to the surface quite quickly, really hitting home the kind of character he is from the get-go. Upon being confused by the absence of his wife and child, he starts to use his investigative journalism skills to get to the bottom of what's going on, and it's here that the story starts to grow in all different directions. Now, the presentation of the story is really kind of what sells a lot of the ideas in this game, so let's start off by talking about the graphics for a moment. State of Mind uses the Unreal Engine as its foundation, and the aesthetic of the game is a fantastic clash of two different main art styles. I noted these at the start of the game as low poly, low res mesh style for the characters themselves, and a more realistic photo-like approach to the environment and its assets. The colours used in the game seem very saturated, so details on the character, like their clothing for example, is clearly defined separately from the skin tones and other garments that the character might also be wearing. The somewhat unique look to the characters themselves also carries over to the building structures too, especially in City 5, where some of the architectural choices are just as obscure, but they fit in just as well. Now, I'm no artist or anything like that, so I don't think I know or I'm aware of any particular technical terms that would explain why all this kind of goes so well together. But I think one way to put it would be more real than real. Sort of familiar to what we already have and know, but just more fantastic. In fact, because so many of the aspects of the presentation are heavily stylized, it makes the really hard-hitting moments all the more poignant due to how real they seem in comparison. The characters can be a little rough around the literal edges now and again, But this kind of artifact isn't something I haven't seen in other titles that also use the Unreal Engine. Thankfully though, the rest of the presentation makes this easily forgivable. The animations, which look to be more keyframed than motion capture, look great. Simple, but great. Now, I say simple not as a negative point. The animations do what they do and they do what they need to do, and they do that very well. In cutscenes, the energy that the animations maybe lack, the camera work makes up for in spades. In fact, in many cases, the camera work brings out a lot of life and urgency to a scene or the animations themselves. Whether it be relaying the action from different angles for a scene or creating establishing shots for new environments, the photography direction in this game is top-notch. Moving on to the sound of the game then, and I'll kick off with the soundtrack, just like last time. It's pretty great. The album, some of which you're listening to right now, is awash with light, airy background atmosphere mixes, some bigger orchestral scores for the more epic events that occur in the game, with a dribble of eerie but very moving piano pieces in there for good measure. The right pieces are paired wonderfully with the right scenes and situations, and it does seem as if the score itself was written as if they were composing for a movie. Listening to the album from start to finish, the experience was like reliving the aspects of the game in my head. Now, there aren't many soundtracks in recent memory that have been able to do that for me and get me that deep into the listening experience to the point where I'm actually seeing the scenes in my head. One of my favourites that have done that in my life so far is Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, specifically the Battle for Peace. But this album is definitely right up there. So a huge hats off to the composer for that, absolutely stellar job, great music. The sound design in the game was also nicely done, in almost the same way as the animations and the graphics. Seem simple, seem predictable, but it's all you need to get the players to feel what's going on. From the sound of the robot police patrolling about the place to the sound of a futuristic cargo plane landing to drop off its haul, it's all on point. But the voice work, the voice work is on fire. The writing, which I will get more into later on, is well done by itself, but the voice performances in this title are right up there with some of the biggest players in the industry for me. When you have talent from the likes of Hitman, Witcher 3, Horizon Zero Dawn, Pillars of Eternity, The Division, and these are only to name a few by the way, you can rest assured that the epic writing that relays the spiralling, zigzagging plotline through the experience is going to be in good hands. Or mouths. Now, I could go on and on and on about that for hours, but that's enough for now, I think. Let's move on to gameplay and mechanics. The game has a strong emphasis on choice matters, and, to a degree, puzzle solving. The former because there are a lot of choices for you to make, and most of them actually mean something. Some of which you can actually see the results from almost immediately after making the decision, whilst others make you aware of the consequences for your choices much later on in the story. And the latter, the puzzle-solving aspect of the game, are mainly cases of deduction and light mechanical puzzles. But the weird thing that stood out for me about the puzzles is that they were almost all later on in the game. There was a couple of stonkers that really rattled my brain towards the end of the playthrough, purely because I didn't see them coming due to how casual, when not absent, the puzzles were earlier in the title. But from about 3/4 of the way through the playthrough, the puzzles really started to ramp up. Now, I'm not complaining, I'm just surprised because having the puzzles all come in at once at such a late stage in the game, you have to be careful with that because it can very much affect the pacing of the storytelling itself. And then there's the story, and the narrative, and how it flows throughout the game. I could talk about that for hours, I really could. But obviously there are people who are maybe watching this video who are maybe planning to play the game, or have maybe not watched the Let's Play series yet on the channel, and I definitely don't want to spoil it for them. So what I'll do here is I'll talk about the writing and how it hits the player, or at least me specifically, without actually delving too much into specific story points. Now, everybody watching this has probably played a video game before, I'm assuming. We've all seen or played games that have strong narrative, and it's that narrative that pushes the player from the beginning of the game all the way through to the end, perhaps with the occasional diversion here and there. Typically, the start of the game is initializing the characters, giving them a little bit of fluff to fill out their backstory a little, which is then used to provide context for their role, their actions, their overall personality, and overall place and belonging in the story moving forward. Most of the time, this fluff is forgettable information because all you really care about is who the character is now and who you're going to be throughout the game. State of Mind is a little bit different. Sure, it does all the same things. It initializes the characters, delivers little pieces of forgettable information that can easily be taken for granted, while you try to catch up to who the character you are playing is in the here and now. And this is where I went wrong. The writer throughout the entire game has your mind in the palm of their hands, using these classic and predictable story delivery techniques to purposely misdirect you, and have you focus on elements that are, once again, in the here and now. It wasn't until I started to put the Let's Play series together that I realised exactly how little I was paying attention at the start of the game, and exactly how much I was told, but didn't pay attention to, that informs so much on how these characters and their stories develop throughout the game. I felt like an idiot. Like I felt genuinely stupid. There are so many characters that you take for granted as side characters at the start, putting little weight or value on what they have to say or what they do, who then become key parts of the story itself. And not only that, but they do it in ways that you never really anticipate either. Now think Saw, and I mean the first Saw movie for a moment. At the end of that film, the whole plot and all the details within it are kind of explained to you, within the context that is not particularly obvious to the viewer who's not really paying attention to the movie on their first watch. I am one of those guys. And when it does this, and the mask is taken off of the plot at the end of the story, you kind of get that, oh, moment, you know? State of Mind does this, except it doesn't tell you that you've missed something. It doesn't tell you that, oh, by the way, there are some connections that you should be making here, and you're not. You just kind of have to work it out for yourself, which is great. And on top of that, the fact that the story is still very, very enjoyable and still very easily followed and without getting lost, without making these connections, is again a testament to the writing of the story itself. All I can say here is that there is almost no writing, no information, and no interactions that go to waste in this game. Everything matters. Maybe not now, and maybe not soon, but it matters in the game as a whole. The people, their situation, their history with you, the reason why they're even in the story at all, there is nothing that means nothing, as everyone you interact with or observe on any level throughout the game is linked to someone else in the game or some other event in the game that you've either done already or is coming up later on in the story. Misdirection is indeed, I think, the correct word to use here. And what's great is that they don't do that thing where they try to be smart and, trip up the player. And that's very good, because usually that does not end well and just ends up feeling very forced. You think it's character development. You think it's progress in the story, when in actual fact, you were told little, not even cryptic details that draw a vague picture relating to something when you were actually playing the beginning of the game. But you don't realise it at the time. Or at least, I didn't. Then there is the subject matter itself. Highly inflammatory and highly controversial in a lot of areas. The game portrays a proper Orwellian nightmare where the concept of state and democracy are dissolved completely. And everything you watch, listen to, read about, and interact with leads to, or comes from, one overarching controlling corporate entity. There are nuances to the world that provide a structural context for how everything works, while at the same time stating to the player, this is a dangerous future. A lot of behaviours that you are observing today in these characters and events of fiction are not too dissimilar from the world that you engage with every single day in reality. If you don't pay attention, this world that you are playing in right now could very well become real. I mean, you can look almost anywhere in the game and think of an analogue in today's world. Corporations that seem to own and benefit from everything, despite products and services that they provide having very different labels and use cases, providing the illusion of choice. Elite few who are high and mighty enough to assign themselves the roles of the grand designer of humanity's future, despite being completely unqualified to do so, and are so deeply embedded inside their own megalomaniac tendencies that they only can see the good side for themselves of what their endeavours are aiming for, and ignore the negative ramifications that exist after the fact, especially if it doesn't affect them. Media that's so afraid of their own shadow that if anything remotely touchy should come about, towing the line takes a higher priority than journalistic integrity. The use of fear as a control mechanism, closing down any perspective that doesn't align, using lies as an attempt to discredit the opposition, or outright delete said perspective as a deterrent to any further opposition in the future. This isn't just a vision of the future. To some degree, that is the world that we live in today. But as with in the real world, most people are distracted to some degree through the obligations of their everyday life, or perhaps are willfully ignorant in a lot of cases, acknowledging only the information that serves them, completely forgetting and disregarding the fact that what doesn't serve them also comes along for the ride. And I guess that last point kind of brings me to my final thought on state of mind. In recent days, when trying to get future generations to be wary of the future, it has become somewhat acceptable in parts of the world to recommend George Orwell's 1984 as required reading within various education programs. While definitely not a literary legend as 1984, I would put State of Mind right up there in the must playlist, and this game should have a reserved spot in almost anyone's library. In a world that sells the illusion that there is never a better time to live than today, whilst at the same time ignoring and denying the fact that the human race as a global community has almost never been more divided, through tribalism, whether it be economical, intellectual, racial, or political. Us versus them. Democrat versus Republican. Left versus right, Epic versus Steam, Magnum versus Häagen-Dazs. Despite almost no one stupid enough to pick a side on anything being able to answer what us and them even means, this remains a prevalent mode of social organisation and operation in today's world. Jeez. Categorical thinking is going to be the death of us. I'm telling you. Even on an individual level, human beings find it very hard to get over themselves enough to realise that they don't need to have everything they want, or are told they want, just because their peers are stupid enough to fall for the sales pitch, scared to be a them, and not an us. It makes life easier, I feel safer, are common explanations for not practicing any sense of critical thought whatsoever when essentially handing the keys to your thoughts, feelings, habits and overall personality to an entity whose sole goal is to profit from that data and then invade your life further when the new version comes out. And for some reason, people align with favourites here and defend them to the death? Pick your poison. Am I right? On the screen right now is an expression that has held true since the very day it was first uttered. It has been proven time and time again, but for whatever reason, people allow themselves to get pushed into positions where they are forced to react, not think. If the wisdom in such words is ignored, it could very well lead to a reality that Daedalic Games is proposing here in State of Mind. Today, the profit motivation of a capitalist market system demands bad actors to manipulate, rather than educate, a body of people for their own personal gain, and sell you stuff you don't even need. Oh, and while I mentioned tribalism earlier, and a few of the various ways it can manifest, global unity, while definitely a good long-term goal, is not exactly the answer that we're looking for to solve today's problems either. While the idea of dissolving borders and unifying humanity under a more comprehensive banner sounds on the surface to be a great step of progress in the maturity of us as a people, there will always be a negative aspect to that so long as the prevalent motivational mechanisms and incentive structures in the likes of a capitalist economy reign dominant, where trade strategizing dominance is the default mode of resource, product and service distribution, and the consumer is led to believe that they live in a world of perpetual scarcity. The combination of these two things, global unity and a predatory market system, just makes the hunting ground for the most heinous players in this game that we call life so much bigger and easier to access, and the likes of you and I will forever be the prey. We are attention to occupy, minds to entertain, intellects to be deceived, and data to mine. Play along, or be deleted. Daedalic Games have discussed these things and so much more in a wonderfully crafted tale of love, loss, betrayal, deceit, subterfuge, and to some degree, enlightenment. They put forward the best and the worst of the so-called human condition into an arena, using the real world of today as a template from which to hypothesize a potential future that, if today's world is left unchecked, and our civilization's priorities stay on course as they are today, could very well become the default way of life. Much like many other blueprints for a transhumanist agenda have already spelled out for us throughout the pages of history. I have loved and hated these characters, sometimes at the same time. I have felt joy and pain for them as well, through the events that they have gone through in this story, all of which is a testament to just how well these events and characters were written and how well executed the performances of the voice cast are. This game will challenge you. It will demand from you, as a parent, a friend, a lover, hell, even just as a person. But it's this layman's opinion that Daedalic Entertainment purposely put the player against some really hard to face challenges, and due to their relevance in today's world as well, force the player to think and consider their actions before moving forward, ultimately learning more about themselves along the way, perhaps considering what other observations in their own reality are of note. All of that while making sure that, you enjoy the ride. It has been said for a long time that if one is to attempt to communicate challenging, controversial, or any hard-to-face perspective that goes against the grain, creative works are the most effective method of doing so, as art has this way of sneaking behind the ego and communicating with a person on a very deep level. State of Mind is a fine example of this. It tells a moving, complex and compelling story, planting seeds of thought throughout, and leaves some big questions for the player to answer. And that concludes my final thoughts on State of Mind. Now make no mistake, this is a hard game. Almost like trying to read a very hard book, and I made the mistake of playing it in rather long sittings, sometimes 4 to 5 hours. I would not recommend that. It's dense, and persistently so. So if you are going to play this game, I would highly recommend that you perhaps play it for a couple of hours and then take a break. Let what you've experienced, kind of sink in a little bit, and then go back to it and play some more. Because binging this kind of experience, as great as it is, and it is great, it just breaks your brain. Just breaks your brain. Now, there is a lot in this video that I have not said, and what I have said is diluted, to say the least. But if it wasn't, this video would be 4 hours long. And let's be honest, I'm not here to, tell you what to think, or tell you how to understand something. I'm not here to tell you what to buy, or what not to buy. And let's face it, you guys have brains, and I would much rather hear those perspectives. So if you do have any comments or remarks regarding this video, the game itself, the Let's Play series, or really anything else at all, feel free to comment down below, and I will make sure to try and reply with something smart. No promises. For now though, it's time for me to leave you to the rest of your day. Thank you very much for watching this final thought on State of Mind, I hope it has given you some insight as to whether or not this game is for you or not for you. If you also watched the Let's Play series, thank you very much for watching that as well. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Anyway, I'll leave you alone now, but I will be back very soon with another series and another game. Make sure to keep up to date on Twitter for any updates on that as and when they happen, and of course if you are at all social, you can join the Discord channel if you like, and talk to people. Sometimes they talk. Anyway, the links for both of these things are in the video description below, as well as in every other video I've ever released and will release in the future. For now, take care, and I'll see you again very, very soon.